Today, I want to talk about countries running out of money. And we need to actually spare a thought for Argentina, which this week increased interest rates in one go by 6%, bringing its interest rate up to 97%. And guess what's causing this? Inflation. Inflation in April in Argentina came in at a whopping 109%. That's basically 10% increase in prices every month, month on month. Sunil, what's happening in Argentina at the moment?
Well, it never feels that Argentina's too far away from a financial crisis, but I think even by the standards of the last 20 or 30 years, this is quite a serious one. What we've seen is in terms of that interest rate you were talking about, it's really the central bank trying to do everything that it can to limit inflation just rising further and further. You know, remember that 97% rate the next time you're worried about your refinancing at 4.5% on your mortgage. I think the real issue that they have and what they're trying to do with the interest rates is not so much stem domestic demand, but I think it's more actually stop capital from leaving the country, because every time that happens, it's putting more pressure on the Argentine peso to weaken. And that's actually probably more of a problem as far as inflation is concerned. I mean, the official Argentine peso rate is down 35% this year versus the US dollar, but that's with a lot of effort to kind of massage it and limit the falls. If you look at some of the more market-based rates, the implied falls are even sharper. The bad news only ever comes in multiples, and at the same time as all this, Argentina is having a record drought. Not great if you're an agricultural powerhouse, and it also has political uncertainty because of elections coming in October. So the general forecast is a deep recession this year, possible reduction in growth of over 3%.
Okay, so Argentina is also still under an IMF bailout. So does it actually have the resources or reserves, the money to prop up its ailing economy and currency, as you just mentioned?
Well, the money that really matters here is foreign currency reserves, because essentially what you can do is if you have some foreign currency reserves, you can sell those to buy your own currency and stop it from falling on the open markets. Now, Argentina currently has a debt program with the IMF worth $44 billion. Which obviously gives them some reserves to play with. And they're trying to renegotiate that now, because the issue is that the general estimate of their actual reserves is probably more like 34 billion. So markets can see a stage where there may not be that much left in the tank. And in that sense, I guess you could say the risk is that Argentina runs out of money.
Okay, so that's really interesting. Argentina running out of money. Can the same be said of the US and what's happening in the US? What do you think's happening there?
Well, the way that people have talked about this is in the context of what's called the debt ceiling. So this is essentially a limit that was set in legislation back in 1917 as a way of kind of limiting the government in terms of how much they could borrow. So essentially there's a limit on the total government borrowing, supposed to be a kind of check and balance, I suppose. And if you hit the debt ceiling, then you cannot smooth the path between one set of tax income and another, which is paid by people. If you run out of tax money, you are not going to be able to make payments for wages of government employees or maybe even interest payments on your borrowings. So pretty challenging.
Okay, so obvious question here is, does that mean what? Does the US just going to stop borrowing?
Well, in principle, it would mean that. I think we need to introduce a note of pragmatism here. If you look historically since 1917, the debt ceiling has been approached 78 times, and 78 times they've somehow found a way to increase it. I mean, the reality is it's very hard to put a number on what the ceiling should be and say, well, any more than that is clearly too much, which is why right now the ceiling is set at $31.4 trillion. Now, maybe in real kind of terms, what does that mean? So for every person in the United States, that's about $100,000. Wow. Now, what does that mean in terms of the likelihood of the debt ceiling being raised this time? Well, the history does tell you something. It is politically very painful if you are associated with potential defaults on US borrowings or federal workers not being paid. So it is highly likely, at least this is what our advisors tell us, that the negotiations are happening behind the scenes and that we will see a debt ceiling increase. But it is definitely a measure that keeps things on the agenda and does create a bit of political uncertainty. We've maybe seen the odd wobble in the equity market already. On balance, we think we will get through this, and that's one of the reasons we're happy to own positions in the equity market and even in the US Treasury bond market as well.
Okay, so no, thanks for that this week. That's really interesting. So it sounds like they'll just continue to kick that can down the road. So no, thank you. And we will be back again next week with another topic that's caught our eye. Thanks.